The quiet truth about relationships: letting go is not losing. Take a deep breath with me. Inhale, hold it, and exhale slowly. Let yourself arrive, not in the future, not in the past, but right here, in this breath, in this moment. Now, listen closely. There's a simple Zen teaching that goes, "That which comes, let it come. That which goes, let it go. What remains, let it be." It sounds simple, almost too simple, but don't mistake its softness for lack of depth. These words carry the weight of centuries of spiritual clarity, and if you truly sit with them, they will shake you free from illusions you didn't know you were carrying. Because here's the truth most of us were never taught. Relationships are not always meant to last. They are not all written in the stars. They are not all fated to be your forever. Sometimes they are simply sacred visitors, passing through your life like the wind through trees. They stir something in you, they change you, but they are not meant to stay. And yet, we resist this. We fight it. We attach so tightly to the story that if something feels powerful, it must be permanent. That if someone enters our heart, they must stay there forever. That love means keeping, possessing, holding on. But what if love, real love, is the opposite? What if love is allowing? What if love is letting go when holding on would only lead to suffering? So many of us spend years clinging to someone we were only meant to meet briefly. Not because they were unimportant, but because their role was temporary. A lesson, a mirror, a moment of awakening. Think back. Have you ever met someone who felt like a storm and a sunrise all at once? You barely knew them, but they awakened something deep inside you. Maybe they helped you feel alive again. Maybe they shattered your illusions. Maybe they broke your heart in a way that forced you to rebuild it stronger. Whatever they brought, it was real, but that doesn't mean it was forever. The suffering, Zen teaches, begins when we try to make impermanence permanent, when we try to freeze a flame, when we grip something that was always meant to flow. The wise ones, those who live in peace, not fantasy, don't cling. They don't label every connection as destiny. They watch, they listen, and when it's time, they release. Softly, respectfully, and with deep understanding. So I ask you now, is there someone in your life you've been holding on to, even when every part of your body whispers, it's time to let go? Are you afraid that without them you won't feel whole? Are you staying because of love or because of fear? And if it is fear, what are you really afraid of? Being alone? Starting over? Facing yourself? Here's the sacred paradox. Letting go does not mean the love wasn't real. It means you've grown enough to recognize that love is not always meant to bind. It is sometimes meant to free. The Buddha said that attachment is the root of suffering. But what he meant wasn't that we shouldn't love. He meant we must love without trying to possess. We must learn to bless someone's path even when it no longer walks beside ours. So maybe today is not just another video. Maybe today is a soft turning point, a gentle moment of truth. You are not broken for letting go. You are not heartless. You are awakening. You are honoring the nature of things. Because in the end, real wisdom doesn't force. It doesn't grasp. It accepts. It flows. And it knows deeply that sometimes the most loving act is to release. Are you ready to explore this path of awareness with me? To see what love looks like when it's not about holding on, but letting go? Let's begin together. Part 1. The subtle signs you're drifting apart. Let me take you back to the beginning. Do you remember that moment when you first met them? It felt like the universe had quietly whispered, "Yes, this is it." The way your eyes met, the way the words flowed so naturally, like rivers returning to their source. There was an ease to it, a sacred spark. You might have even said, "This must be fate." But what if what felt like fate was actually a lesson disguised as love? In the beginning, the connection can feel so vivid, so alive. But over time, something subtle begins to shift, something you can't quite name. You still talk, you still share, but something's missing. The words are there, yet they no longer land. The laughter still echoes, but it feels oddly distant. You start noticing the silence, not the peaceful kind that makes you feel safe and held, but the kind that feels hollow, like sitting next to someone and still wondering if you're alone. Have you ever felt that? Sitting beside someone you care about, but feeling lonelier than when you're actually by yourself. Zen teaches us that real connection is not measured by how much we say, but by the silence between two souls, and whether that silence feels like home or like emptiness. When two people are truly aligned, they can sit together in quiet and still feel completely seen. That stillness becomes sacred. It breathes peace. But when something is off, even silence becomes noisy. It fills with unspoken questions, anxiety, confusion. You find yourself wondering, why do I feel more at ease when they're gone? Why do I miss myself when I'm with them? This is not about blame. This is not about fault. It's about noticing, about becoming aware. Because the earliest signs of misalignment are not loud. They don't come as arguments or slamming doors. They come as discomfort in the quiet, as the invisible distance that begins to grow between words, as the moments when you're together, but your heart feels somewhere else. And if you ignore it long enough, that silence becomes the soundtrack of your disconnection. Sometimes we confuse conversation for closeness. We think, we talk all the time, we must be okay. But ask yourself honestly, are you being heard or are you just talking? Are your truths landing in their heart or bouncing off the surface of a distracted gaze? True connection doesn't need constant words. It needs presence. It needs stillness that feels nourishing, not draining. And yet, so many of us settle for noise. We fill the void with busyness, with distraction, with surface-level exchanges, because the deeper silence feels too revealing. But here's the truth. You can only ignore that kind of silence for so long before it begins to speak for itself. And what it often says is, this person may have been meant to enter your life, but not to stay. So I invite you to pause here with me. Close your eyes, just for a moment, and imagine sitting in silence with them. Do you feel seen? Do you feel safe? Do you feel home? Or do you feel like a stranger in your own story? Zen doesn't rush us toward answers. It simply invites us to see, clearly, honestly, gently. To listen, not just with ears, but with the soul. And sometimes what we see in the silence is the first truth we've been too afraid to name. Let this be your moment to begin naming it, not with judgment, but with awareness. Because awareness is the seed of liberation, and once you begin to see clearly, you can no longer pretend not to know. Part 2. When the truth begins to surface. Let's take another breath together. And as you exhale, imagine this. The fire of passion has started to cool. The honeymoon phase, those golden days of effortless affection, has slowly faded into the background. And now, something else begins to rise. Something less glamorous, but more honest. This is the moment in a relationship when chemistry steps aside and truth walks in. In Zen, it's said that when the fog of desire lifts, the landscape of reality becomes visible. And for many, that landscape is not what they expected. The quirks you once found charming now feel irritating. The differences you once embraced now feel like walls. The little compromises you made with ease now feel like sacrifices that cost you a piece of yourself. You may find yourself thinking, why does this feel harder than it used to? Why am I so tired, even though I'm still trying? This is not failure. This is the clarity that comes when the dust of infatuation finally settles. And it's here, in this new light, that you begin to notice something deeper. The effort you're making no longer feels natural. It doesn't flow from joy. It feels like labor, like survival, like you're carrying the weight of something that isn't walking beside you anymore. Love, in its purest form, doesn't drain us. It may challenge us, yes, but it nourishes as it challenges. It invites growth without forcing you to shrink. But in misaligned relationships, effort begins to feel like a transaction. You give, hoping to receive. You bend, hoping they'll see you. You adjust, but slowly start losing yourself in the process. Maybe you've asked for empathy and received logic instead. Maybe you've opened your heart and been met with indifference or silence. And the hard part? You still care. So you keep trying. You keep hoping. You keep repeating the cycle. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. Trying harder doesn't always fix misalignment. Sometimes it just delays the moment when you finally realize this isn't working anymore. You begin to question if love should really feel this heavy. Should loving someone feel like constantly managing emotions, negotiating safety, walking on emotional eggshells? Zen invites us to ask a different question. Is this effort a path to peace or a loop of suffering? Because there's a kind of love that asks you to become more of yourself, and there's another kind that slowly requires you to become less. You were not born to spend your life proving your worth to someone who can't see it. You were not meant to wear masks just to be loved. You were meant to be seen fully and still chosen. And if you find yourself hiding the most honest parts of who you are just to keep someone from leaving, you are not in a performance. So pause here and breathe, not to escape, but to feel what's real. What are you still trying to fix that was never truly whole to begin with? What part of you is exhausted, not because you don't love them, but because you've been carrying the relationship alone? There is no shame in realizing that something once beautiful has run its course. There is only liberation in naming it gently. The Buddha didn't teach us to cling to what brings suffering. He taught us to see clearly, to meet the truth with compassion, and then act from wisdom. So if you're starting to feel more burdened than loved, more invisible than embraced, know this: you are not failing. You are awakening. And sometimes awakening begins with the brave decision to stop trying to force something that your soul has already outgrown. Part 3. When the soul knows before the mind understands. Let's pause for a breath. Inhale slowly. And now let it go. Now listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. Because some truths don't speak in words. They echo through the quiet places inside us, where the mind hasn't reached, but the soul already knows. Have you ever been in a relationship where everything seems okay on the outside, but something deep inside you whispers, "This isn't it"? At first, that voice is small, a flicker, a tightness in the chest when they speak but don't really see you. A dull ache when your laughter fades too quickly. You ignore it. You explain it away. It's just a phase. They're busy. I'm being too sensitive. But the soul is patient. It doesn't argue. It simply waits. And with every moment that feels misaligned, that voice grows louder. Not harshly, but clearly. Zen teaches us, the first betrayal is never from the other. It is from ourselves when we stay in something we already know has ended. And that knowing doesn't arrive as logic. It arrives as a feeling, a quiet grief that shows up in the still moments. In the car ride home, in the silence before sleep, in the mornings when you look at them and feel more distance than warmth. You begin to ask questions your mind doesn't want to answer. Why am I still here? Why am I holding on to something that no longer breathes life into me? When did love turn into effort without reward? You may still laugh together, you may still sleep beside each other, but the space between hearts has widened, so subtly, so slowly, that one day you realize you feel more alone with them than without them. And here's what no one talks about. Sometimes it's not that the other person did anything wrong. It's that the connection quietly stopped feeding your soul. It no longer matches who you are becoming. But instead of leaving, we stay. We stay because it's familiar. We stay because we fear starting over. We stay because part of us still believes we can fix it. But what if? What needs fixing is not the relationship, but our willingness to ignore what we already know. You see, the soul is honest. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't negotiate truth. It simply reflects what is, without judgment, without shame. In Buddhist practice, this is called sati, mindfulness. It's the art of being aware of what's really happening inside us before the mind rushes to create stories. And when you start listening to that inner voice, you realize you've been shrinking to fit into something you've already outgrown. You've been silencing your truth just to preserve the illusion of harmony. You've been loyal to someone else's comfort at the cost of your own peace. It's not that they stopped loving you, it's that you stopped loving the version of yourself you had to become to stay. So the question becomes, is this relationship still aligned with your soul? Or are you staying because it's harder to imagine who you'd be without it? Zen doesn't offer quick answers. It offers space. It says, sit with the discomfort, let the questions rise, and trust that the voice within, however quiet, is wiser than the noise outside. You are not selfish for listening to your soul. You are not heartless for choosing truth over comfort. You are simply waking up. Because when the soul knows, no amount of logic can unknow it. And the longer you deny that knowing, the heavier your heart will become. Until one day, staying feels like the real loss. So take one more breath. Ask yourself gently, is the person I'm becoming still welcome here? And if the answer is no, then maybe, just maybe, the most loving thing you can do is not to hold on tighter, but to let go. Part 4. When one of you has quietly stopped trying. Let's breathe together, just once. A slow inhale and a gentle exhale. Now, let me ask you something quietly, without judgment. Have you ever looked at someone you once loved deeply and realized they've already stopped trying? Not dramatically, not with harsh words or final ultimatums, but in the quietest way. They simply stopped reaching. He no longer asks how her day went. She no longer waits for him to ask. The intimacy that once sparked through touch, glances, and simple questions has faded into routine. They still talk, they still share space, but something essential is missing: presence. The connection has become a script, lines memorized, actions repeated, like actors stuck in a play neither of them believes in anymore. And here's the part that hurts the most. If she left tomorrow, he wouldn't stop her, and if he walked away, she wouldn't chase. There would be no storm, no final fight, just silence, a mutual knowing that the effort has run dry. This is the point where many relationships arrive, not with dramatic endings, but with slow erosion. Zen teaches us, you cannot walk together if only one of you is still walking. In love, effort should be mutual, not equal, but shared, not always balanced perfectly, but alive, responsive, aware. When one person becomes the gardener and the other only receives the bloom, the balance begins to collapse. The garden becomes dry, not out of neglect, but because no one is watering it anymore. Have you noticed this in your own life? Moments where you keep giving, but the other has quietly stepped back. Where conversations become check-ins, and affection becomes habit, not heart. And yet, you stay, not because it feels good, but because it feels familiar. The truth is, most relationships don't end in fire. They end in silence. They end the moment one person realizes, I don't feel anything anymore. Not anger, not desire, just stillness. And not the sacred kind. This kind of stillness is heavy. It says, I've stopped hoping this will change. But listen, this isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Sometimes people stop trying not because they stopped caring, but because something inside them knew they were no longer being met where they stood. And the tragedy isn't that love is lost. It's that both people are still showing up physically, while emotionally they've already let go. In Buddhism, this is seen as a moment of karmic closure. The bond is complete. There is no more energy flowing between souls. What remains is only memory and momentum. But we hold on, because letting go feels like failure, because we're afraid of the unknown, because a quiet relationship still feels safer than facing an empty space. But ask yourself, is staying with someone who has already stopped seeing you truly safer than standing in your own truth? Zen gently reminds us, when you must convince someone to stay, they have already gone. So if you're in a relationship where you no longer feel effort, where you've stopped expecting and they've stopped reaching, maybe it's time to ask, is this love still alive, or are we just honoring a memory of what it once was? And if the answer feels too painful to speak out loud, know that silence is its own language. And in that silence, you already know. Sometimes the most compassionate act is not holding on tighter, but releasing with grace. Not because you gave up, but because you finally accepted they stopped trying a long time ago. Part 5. The final sign, peace, not pain. Take a deep breath with me, not to hold on, but to let go. Now imagine this moment. You're sitting across from the person you once couldn't imagine living without, and suddenly you feel peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from resolution or reunion, but a deeper kind, the peace of release. There's no fight, no anger, no begging or blame. Just a quiet stillness, like two leaves finally drifting in different directions after sharing the same branch for a while. This is the ending most people don't expect, because we're taught that endings should be loud, that they should hurt, explode, break us open. But sometimes the most honest ending is the softest one. No tears, no shouting, just clarity. You look at them and you no longer ask, will you stay? You no longer plead, please understand me. Instead, you breathe and finally accept what your soul has known for a long time. That this chapter is over. That nothing more needs to be said. That walking away isn't a betrayal. It's a blessing. Zen teaches us, enlightenment is the moment you no longer need them to be yours in order to be whole. And this is the moment when you realize you were never missing anything to begin with. You just forgot who you were while trying to hold on. There's something sacred about choosing yourself without needing to make the other person wrong. There's wisdom in releasing with compassion, in leaving with love rather than resentment. Because true endings don't come from hate. They come from understanding, from seeing the full picture and realizing this is no longer mine to carry. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop clinging is the moment you finally feel free. It's not numbness. It's not apathy. It's grace. You're not running away. You're returning to yourself. Ask yourself, if you walked away today, Would your soul feel heavier or lighter? Would you feel like you're losing love or simply letting go of a story that's already been told? We often confuse staying with strength, but sometimes strength is the quiet act of walking away without needing permission, without needing drama, just a deep bow to what was and a step forward into what is. There is no shame in outgrowing a connection, no failure in choosing peace over persistence. Because not everything sacred is meant to last. Some things are meant to awaken you, to break you open, to teach you what love is and what it is not. So if you find yourself in that final moment, not of collapse, but of calm, honor it. That stillness you feel, that's not emptiness. That's your spirit breathing again. Let it. You let it. You don't need a perfect ending to begin again. You just need one honest breath, one true yes to yourself. Because when you stop clinging, you stop suffering. And when you stop suffering, you realize you were never abandoned. You were redirected. Back to your truth. Back to your path. Back home.
5 subtle signs your relationship is spiritually misaligned. Let's take a moment of silence together, not to escape, but to listen. Because in love, the loudest truths are often whispered. They don't scream. They don't demand. They wait, in the background of your busy days, until you're quiet enough to finally hear them. Today, I want to guide you through 5 signs, 5 quiet truths that many people ignore, until they no longer can. 1. The silence feels hollow. Not all silence is peaceful. In a soul-aligned connection, silence feels like sanctuary. You don't need to speak, because you feel seen without saying a word. But when 2 souls drift apart, silence becomes noise, unspoken tension, invisible distance. You sit side by side and still feel completely alone. The TV is on, the dinner is shared, but the presence, it's missing. Zen reminds us, real connection lives not in words, but in the quality of stillness between 2 hearts. So ask yourself, when we're quiet, do I feel held or do I feel forgotten? 2. Love feels like labor. There's a kind of love that feels effortless, not because it's always easy, but because it's rooted in truth. But when love becomes a job, when every day feels like managing, proving, fixing, enduring, you're no longer loving, you're surviving. When was the last time you offered affection not out of fear, but out of joy? When did your relationship stop being a shared garden and become a daily performance? If you constantly feel like you're shrinking yourself to make it work, that's not love. That's self-abandonment. 3. Loneliness in their presence. This is one of the most painful truths. You can be lying in bed next to someone and feel like you're in a different galaxy. You can laugh at the same jokes, eat the same meals, and still ache with a loneliness you can't explain. Buddhism teaches us, loneliness is not the absence of people, but the absence of connection. Are you still together or just in the same space? There's nothing lonelier than loving someone who no longer feels you. 4. Intuition becomes louder than their words. At first, it's just a whisper. This doesn't feel right. But you silence it with excuses. You tell yourself, I'm just overthinking, or they'll change, or it's just a rough patch. But your soul knows. And the more you ignore that voice, the louder it becomes. Not to hurt you, but to wake you up. In Zen, we don't treat intuition as mystery. We treat it as wisdom, refined by presence. So, if your body tightens when they speak, if your breath shortens when they enter the room, ask why. Because the truth you keep avoiding is the one trying to set you free. 5. They become an emotional stranger. The final sign is perhaps the most heartbreaking. One of you is still trying. The other has already left. You share the same roof, the same routine, the same bed, but the emotional thread is gone. There are no more deep questions. No more, "How are you, really?" And the worst part? You stop expecting it. You lower your voice, you hide your storms, because they stopped showing up for them long ago. This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because when the connection becomes one-sided, you're no longer building love, you're rehearsing loss. So, take a deep breath now, and ask yourself with honesty, not fear. Which of these signs is already present in your life? What has your soul been trying to tell you that your mind keeps avoiding? Remember, awareness is not a punishment. It's a portal. When you see clearly, you are free to choose differently. These signs don't mean you failed. They mean the lesson is complete. Let them guide you, not into blame, but into truth. Because the sooner you honor the quiet truth, the sooner you return to your peace.
Letting go is not the end, it's the beginning of freedom. Take one last mindful breath with me. Inhale, and as you exhale, allow something within you to soften. We've walked through a quiet journey together, a journey of signs, of truth, of slow awakenings, and now we arrive here, at the threshold of letting go. But here's the surprising truth. The final sign that a relationship has ended is not pain, it's peace. No shouting, no crashing heartbreak, just a calm knowing. Like a leaf finally letting go of a branch it no longer belongs to. And in that moment, you don't feel the urge to hold on. You don't ache for them to stay. You don't replay the what-ifs or beg for one more chance. Instead, you feel a stillness, a space opening inside you, not empty, but finally free. Buddha once said, "You only lose what you cling to." So when you stop clinging, when you no longer need someone to complete you, you discover the part of you that was whole all along. Letting go doesn't mean the love was meaningless. It means the chapter is complete. It means your soul has learned what it came here to learn. Because not all love is meant to last. Some love is meant to awaken, to stretch us, to reveal our wounds, our longings, our deepest patterns. And once it has done that, its work is complete. What if, just for today, you stopped seeing the end as failure and started seeing it as graduation? What if you trusted that your path is unfolding, not through control, but through presence? In Zen, impermanence isn't a tragedy. It's sacred. It's how the universe moves, shifts, evolves. So maybe this isn't the loss of love. Maybe it's the birth of truth. And in that truth, there is always liberation. Don't be afraid to let go. Not because you stopped loving, but because you finally started loving yourself enough to stop suffering. And if your heart is trembling right now, if you're sitting with the ache of letting someone go, I want you to know, you are not breaking. You are becoming. This is not the death of something beautiful. It's the evolution of it. It's the moment you step out of the story you've been clinging to and into the truth you've been avoiding. You don't need to rush. You don't need to be ready all at once. But when the time comes, when your soul feels lighter in their absence than in their presence, trust that knowing. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Because every ending that brings peace is a beginning in disguise. Breathe deeply and trust the quiet wisdom of your soul. A gentle invitation. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to take one more small step on your journey. Subscribe to this channel, not out of obligation, but out of resonance. If this kind of gentle truth-telling nourishes your heart, You'll find more of it here whenever you're ready at your own pace. And if you feel called, share this video with someone who might need to hear these words today. Sometimes all it takes is a voice to remind us we're not alone. Thank you for walking this path with me. May you continue to choose peace, presence, and truth over illusion, fear, and attachment. Until next time, breathe deeply and trust the quiet wisdom of your soul.